we will be coming up this Saturday talking about Mountains and Water Sutra. And there's a section we'll be taking up that I think I want to just mention that I think is appropriate for continuing this discussion about practice and about Zazen itself. So for me there's this question about, so we sit and we practice and we throw ourselves into Zazen. And then what happens when we get up off the cushion? It was always the question my very first teacher asked always, then what are you going to do when you get up off the cushion? And so these sections that I'm going to refer to tonight in Shobogenzo and also from Shobogenzo, the Mountains and Water Sutra, you refer to that about Zazen as being not only sitting on the cushion. The postures of practice are sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. All the postures of the human. And in many parts of the animal world also. So that is the question. So what do we do after we are sitting? And what does sitting mean? What does sitting refer to? Well, for Dogen Zenji's part, sitting doesn't refer only to sitting as we are sitting in this posture right now. Sitting refers to all of our activities. Not that we are necessarily what we might call meditative, but we are that Dharma position in whatever it is we are doing. And we are carrying the original practice with us in all our activities. So when Dogen Zenji refers to sitting, it's not just this position. It is all of the postures of life and practice. And so sitting means that in the heart mind, that we are awake and aware and alive and practicing as well as we can, making every effort to live in enlightenment. This is the vow that we take during the Bodhisattva precepts. I vow to make every effort to live in enlightenment. So Dogen Zenji means then that sitting is the posture of life. It's our posture of activity and our poise, how we comport ourselves is sitting Zazen in all activities. So in the section that we will study, Shohaku Okamura, the writer of this book, the commentator, is talking about preferences. And this is an old story, of course. Everything would be wonderful in this life if only we didn't have preferences. If we just didn't pick and choose. If we just didn't engage in that kind of thing. But he's talking specifically also about our connections and our attachments, attaching to and craving for pleasant things and wanting everything to be unpleasant, and when it's unpleasant, we are unhappy and dissatisfied. But then he comes to the question of contact between self and other things, and people is the origin of our problems. Well, that's so interesting. This connection to people is really the basis of our problems. Seeing people as objects, engaging with people, talking with people, becoming annoyed by people, all of these things about the relationship between self and other. Of course, he reminds us that without a question of body, of being in form, because we appear in form, there would be no contact with others. To be in form is to be, have the ability to express Buddha, is to be Buddha. So without form, we just don't exist. And there's just, Buddha is not expressed. So we appear in form, and of course, we appear in mind. But this question of self and other remains our great dichotomy. And so he works his way through all of the logical steps around all of this. And then he is talking about Linji, the teacher Linji. And he says, Linji's fundamental teaching is, don't seek anything outside oneself. He says, when students today fail to make progress, where is the fault? The fault lies in the fact that they don't have faith in themselves. If you don't have faith in yourself, then you'll be forever in a hurry, trying to keep up with everything around you. You will be twisted and turned by whatever environment you are in, and you can never move freely. But if you can just stop this mind that goes rushing around moment by moment, looking for something, then you will be no different from the patriarchs and Buddhas. And Dogen goes on to maintain there is no fixed foundation. So the question I raise about this, about how we continue our practice, how we hold that posture of sitting in all of our activities, not meaning that we go around being holy Buddha, or that we be different from who we are, or that we do something and we think, oh, I wasn't thinking about Buddha at that moment. That's not what we are talking about. It is being completely trusting in the faith in our own selves as we proceed through life, in our exchanges with one another, in our activities, in our work, in all that we do. And the question I have, that I ask, is, what do you rely on? This is a very important question for someone in practice. It is actually a question that is at the heart of spiritual practice or spiritual exploration within oneself. What do you rely on? On what do you rely? If we can answer that, then the mountains are always rest at the Dharma position of this moment. And yet there is walking. We rest peacefully here and now, yet we practice going up and going down, stepping forward and backward, ceaselessly and endlessly. And in Shobogenzo, in another chapter, this is on Wanshi's kindly advice for doing seated meditation. So in this, this is just this is half of Shobogenzo. So, and this is fascicle number, oh well, it's one of the fascicles. So in this, Dogen Zenji is instructing us on same kind of thing, exactly the same thing, on seated meditation, which is actually that which is our posture throughout all activity. And he's talking about a small koan as he goes through this chapter. So he's talking here then about Nangaku, This is not the whole of the koan, but to explain what seated meditation meant, Nangaku said, if you would explore what seated meditation is not simply a matter of sitting or lying down. What he is now saying is that seated meditation is doing seated meditation and is not a matter of, say, being physically seated or lying down. It is carrying with us in spirit all that we do and all of our activities. I think I didn't mark my second piece that I wanted to refer to here. But later on in this, Dogen Zenji makes his own needle of Zazen, needle of seated meditation. It is spoken of in this particular translation, but it's the needle of Zazen. And so he is rewriting the original needle of Zazen. But we understand this needle, the acupuncture needle. It is not just the acupuncture needle of Zazen, it is also the acupuncture needle of our whole body in the health of practice, living the entire health of the Buddha as we go forward. So that understanding must be in there when we read the acupuncture needle of Zazen. It means the complete unification and the complete health of body-mind, the important function for Buddha after Buddha, and the pivotal moment for ancestor after ancestor is to let it manifest without deliberately thinking about anything, and to realize it without creating complications. So this complications, once again, the complications of preferences, or the complications we make in our relationships with one another. To not let those kinds of things interfere with our own comportment, our own sense of posture as we sit Zazen while we are gardening, as we are sitting Zazen cooking, or whatever it is we happen to be doing. It is the ability and the practice to not get complicated, not complicate our own heads with the deliberations, our own deliberations, and not complicate life with choosing, picking and choosing. Whatever happens in each moment is the Dharma position of that moment, and it is complete in itself. So we pay attention to whoever is before us. We pay attention to whoever comes up to us in the store and says, "Do you know where the salt is?" We pay complete attention and we think to help that person. That is the Dharma position of that moment. Always the Dharma position, to be present and fully alive without complication, without complications. To realize it, that's a capital I-T, to realize it, to realize awakening without creating complications. To realize our awake moment without complications. And that realization, of course, there is no thinking, without deliberately thinking about anything. When one lets it manifest without thinking about anything, such a manifestation is naturally close to us. So we are present where we are. We are awake and alive where we are in that Dharma position. When one realizes it without creating complications, such a realization is naturally a direct experience. The awakening moment is purely natural mind. It isn't some bizarre going off into the sky or detaching from this earth and this body and this mind. It is pure natural mind. Totally natural. When that manifestation is naturally close to us, there is not the least bit of defilement. We are purely ourselves. When that realization is naturally a direct experience, there is not the least difference between host and guest. And we could talk about host and guest as that which is within, that we are the host of the guest whom we carry within us. But there is also the relationship of host and guest with one another. No complications in it, least difference between host and guest. When we meet someone, there is no inside-outside if we have no preferences. If we pass a beggar on the street, no difference, no discrimination. If we see somebody difficult, somebody we think doesn't match up to us, that's our problem. If we can be in the world without complication, the complication of picking and choosing. And picking and choosing, of course, is also what Dogen means in defilement. Because in that moment when we pick and choose, we decide that something is not worthy of us. Something is not something that we approve of. And therefore we are dismissing the opportunity to truly experience this something in our midst, this host and guest. When the closeness is without the least bit of defilement, that closeness is put aside and falls away, meaning that we are one with everything. When one directly experiences that there is not the least distinction between host and guest, out of that experience come no set plans as we diligently continue to train. We don't think ahead of ourselves. We don't think, oh, how long is she keeping us here? And how long is it going to take to get out of that line at the supermarket? All of these things are about training. There's nothing we do that is not about our training. Everything is our training. And then Dogen Zenji finishes up this acupuncture of Zazen. He says, the water is so clear you can see down to the bottom. As fish swim by, just as fish do. The sky is now boundless, penetrating the heavens. As birds fly off, just as birds do. And then Dogen Zenji finishes this chapter, just this last sentence. He says, in sum, descendants of the Buddha's ancestors need to explore through their training with their master that seated meditation is undoubtedly the one great matter. This is the genuine seal that is transmitted directly, one to one. So not only is Dogen Zenji talking about that Dharma transmission that is face-to-face transmission, but all of our exchanges are transmission. One-to-one is a transmission. If we are awake and aware, we are transmitting the Buddha Dharma. We are transmitting our sitting one-to-one with each one that we encounter, be it the one looking for the salt in the supermarket, the person we encounter in the workplace, somebody we sit next to in a car on the highway or at the stoplight. All of that is the one-to-one transmission. Provided we don't make complication. And not making complications is actually true freedom. We do not have to become entangled in our own minds, in our own shortcomings. We just are. That Dharma position at this moment. This Dharma position at this moment. Maybe have some thoughts or comments.
Are not preferences okay?
Yeah, I have a favorite teacup and coffee cup. And that is different from picking and choosing. This is a step up of discriminating. But I like coffee. I prefer a cup of coffee in the morning. We have those preferences. It gets more complicated if I say, I can only drink this kind of coffee, or I can only drink it out of that cup. Then it starts to get complicated.
But I guess my feeling of this is that it's like when you ask this question of how did you frame it?
Rely. On what do you rely
on? It's almost like you can't just jump into that. It seems. It's like you have to meet the delusion around it too. At least when I think about like where I am now, it's like meeting that limit is sort of like how I come to what I rely on, or like how I know that. It seems. Like I identify the things that I think that I need, and then I work through them and realize that, like, that's not it.
Sure, but your end place is the answer to on what you rely, which is just emptiness, right? That's what you come to.
But it seems like a process too.
Oh, that's okay.
And that this picking and choosing is like the form of which it itself is known. It seems to me.
I'm just practicing Dogen Zenji. This is the practice of Dogen.
I know.
And we don't study Dogen, we practice Dogen.
But I know that this is the absolute mind.
Yes.
And when in that mind, the question of what one relies on drops away, there is no question. So I think to have that question exist in the relative mind that deals in picking and choosing.
I would say that the question is the bridge to the absolute. That the question itself takes me to emptiness, not to the entanglements around it. So just to speak further at that, because there is no other answer except emptiness. So it's the answer is always right behind the question. So to carry the question on what do I rely is the immediate realization of emptiness, so that there is no space between them. So to me, it's an important question to carry for that very Dharma position. Because it is to exhibit one's true self for oneself. And that is a deep within question. But it is to exhibit that for ourselves and to know that it is within emptiness that we completely root ourselves. That is the root position. And so the question itself is carries the immediate answer.
No, I feel as though you answered my question.
Yeah, I just wanted to take it a little.
I don't
It's okay.
know how to further my question.
No, it's okay. I wanted to further my commentary. That happens, we have question and answers and I give a commentary and then we finish and then I think, oh, I want to say this, I want to say something. Or it isn't that I want to, it's that something else rises, that some dharma rises, and so it feels it needs to be said. It's that simple, really.